The stage lights were bright, the music had just faded, and Steve Harvey walked out with his usual swagger. He had that half smile that said, "Yeah, this is gonna be good." The audience clapped loud, like they always do, ready for laughs, maybe some Hollywood stories, maybe even a little life advice. Steve held his note cards like he always does, pacing the floor, throwing in a quick joke that got a few people in the crowd already wiping tears of laughter. Then he said the name, Keanu Reeves. The crowd went wild. People stood up, some even whistled. Steve grinned, eyes twinkling, already teeing up the next joke. But when Keanu walked out, it wasn't with movie star swagger. He was low-key. Dark jeans, black shirt, plain jacket. No flash. Just Keanu. He gave a small wave, smiled politely, and walked over to sit next to Steve. The cheers kept going. He looked almost uncomfortable with it all, like he appreciated the love but didn't know what to do with that much attention. Steve leaned in to give him a warm welcome, cracked a quick line about how Keanu never seems to age. Keanu chuckled, nodded, said thanks. But then, something changed. Keanu's eyes fell on the small silver crucifix hanging around Steve's neck. It was quiet, just a moment. But something shifted in the air. His smile faded just a little. Not because he was upset, just thoughtful. His body settled. His eyes didn't go back to the crowd. They stayed on Steve. And Steve, always reading the room like a pro, picked up on it too. The laughter in the room didn't stop, but it slowed. You could feel it. This wasn't going to be just another interview. Something was coming. Something real. Keanu sat still in the chair, hands resting on his legs, eyes lowered for a second like he was thinking about whether he should even say it. Then he looked up directly at Steve. His voice wasn't loud. He didn't raise it for the camera. He just said, almost like a whisper, "Can I tell you something I've never said in public?" That one sentence changed the whole room. The crowd went quiet, like really quiet. You could hear someone shift in their seat. Steve blinked, surprised. He leaned forward just a little, like his body understood the weight of what was coming before his mind even caught up. He didn't say anything right away. He just nodded once. A small nod, the kind that says, "I'm listening. I'm here." Keanu took a breath. He looked down for a second, then back at Steve and started to speak. His voice was soft, not shaky but careful. Every word seemed like it had been sitting inside him for a long time, waiting for this exact moment. "I've been through some dark stuff," he said. "There were years where I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel anything at all." No one in the crowd moved. Some leaned in. Some had their hands folded over their mouths. It didn't feel like a show anymore. It felt like a real moment, shared by a real person who'd carried something heavy for too long. He talked about how grief doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it's just silence, the kind that hangs over your day, over your bed at night, even when you're surrounded by people. The kind that stays with you no matter how much you work or pretend to smile. "I've smiled through interviews," he said. "Walked red carpets, did the whole thing. But inside I was just empty." And the more he spoke, the more it felt like everyone in the room was carrying a piece of that silence with him. Keanu sat quietly for a moment after that, his hands still, eyes not really focused on anything. Then he spoke again. Calm, steady, but softer now. "There was a time," he said, "when I felt like everything had been taken from me." He didn't build up to it. He just said it straight. "My daughter was stillborn. We never even got to bring her home. And not long after that, Jennifer passed. She was the closest thing I had to home." The room held its breath. Even Steve didn't try to jump in or smooth it over. He just looked at Keanu, eyes wide and heavy. Keanu didn't cry. He didn't need to. His voice carried the weight. He looked down for a second, like the memory had put something heavy back on his shoulders. After that, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to eat. I'd stay awake for days, just lying there, not thinking, not feeling, just empty. He said it like someone who had been there so long, he could describe the room in detail. You can be surrounded by people, he said, but still feel completely alone. That's what it was like. I'd go to work, say my lines, do interviews, and then go home to silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that makes your chest hurt. Steve leaned in slightly, his face full of something more than just sympathy. It was like he knew that silence too. I kept working because it was easier to pretend to be someone else than to be myself, Keanu said. Playing a character meant I didn't have to be the guy who lost everything. He looked up then, and for the first time he looked directly into Steve's eyes. Grief doesn't always come with tears, he said. Sometimes it's just a numbness. You walk through your day like a ghost. You eat because you have to. You smile because people expect you to. But inside you feel like you don't even exist. No one in the studio moved. Even the air felt heavy. This wasn't a Hollywood story. This was a human story. And in that moment, Keanu wasn't a movie star. He was just a man who had been broken and was still learning how to live with the cracks. Keanu's voice lowered, almost like he wasn't speaking to the crowd anymore, just to Steve. There was this one night, he said. It was late. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't eaten properly in days. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be anyone. I just sat in the dark with my phone, not really looking for anything. Just trying not to feel so much. He paused, eyes drifting a little. The studio was so quiet you could hear the camera operator shifting behind the lens. I was scrolling through videos, just tapping, skipping, not even paying attention, he continued. And then, something made me stop. He looked at Steve again. It was you. Steve blinked, confused. You were on stage, not on your show. Just you, holding a mic, talking about storms, talking about pain, about how God doesn't waste it. How sometimes the stuff that breaks us is the stuff that makes us. Steve didn't speak. He just stared, slowly reaching for the small silver cross on his chest. You were wearing that, Keanu said, pointing gently to the crucifix. That's what caught my eye first. That's why I didn't scroll. Keanu sat back slightly as if replaying the moment in his mind. I watched the whole thing. Then I watched it again. And again. He took a breath, not for drama, just to steady himself. You said something like, if you're still breathing, God's not done with you yet. And I don't know why, but that hit different. It didn't sound like a preacher or a speaker. It sounded like a man who had lived through something. His voice cracked just slightly, but he kept going. That next morning, for the first time in weeks, I got up. I didn't feel healed or fixed. But I moved. I stood up. And sometimes, that's the beginning. Steve sat frozen, one hand over his chest, his fingers touching the cross like it had just become heavier. I never told anyone, Keanu said softly. But I've carried your words with me ever since. Keanu leaned in just a little, his eyes steady, voice calm. Steve, he said, you're not just a comedian. Steve gave a small, confused smile, like he wasn't sure where this was going. You're something else, Keanu continued. You're a minister. You just don't wear a collar. You wear a suit. Steve let out a breath, almost laughed it off, but didn't say anything. His eyes dropped for a second like the compliment felt too big to hold. But Keanu didn't stop. You think you're just making people laugh, just helping folks get through their day. But what you're really doing is saving lives. Steve looked at him now, eyes a little wider, like he wanted to speak but didn't have the words yet. That night when I saw that video, Keanu said, you weren't trying to preach. You weren't trying to be anything other than yourself. That's why it hit so hard. That's why it stuck. He paused, then added, you didn't know it, but you were reaching me when no one else could. Keanu sat back slightly, but his eyes never left Steve. I remember your words, man, word for word. You said, God doesn't always call the qualified. He qualifies the called. You said, sometimes your pain is your purpose. Steve swallowed hard, his hand moving again to the small crucifix on his chest. His fingers wrapped around it, tight this time, not for the camera, not for drama. Just instinct, like the weight of it had suddenly doubled. That cross you wear, Keanu said, It's not just a symbol, it's a signal. And I think it was meant to reach me. Steve looked down at it, eyes blinking faster now. You don't see yourself the way others do, Keanu said. But I'm telling you right now, you were more than a voice on a screen. You were a lighthouse. A tear slid down Steve's cheek. He didn't wipe it. He didn't need to. It wasn't for the audience. It was real, quiet, honest. And in that moment, the roles flipped. Keanu wasn't the guest anymore. He was the one offering something bigger than words. He was giving Steve a mirror to finally see what everyone else already saw. Steve sat there quiet, his hand still holding the cross on his chest, eyes shiny with tears he wasn't trying to hide. Keanu leaned in again, softer this time, like he didn't want to break the moment. You wonder if you've done enough, he said. I'm here to tell you, you have. Steve didn't look up right away. He just breathed slowly, like those words hit somewhere deep. Somewhere he'd been hiding questions. The room was still. No clapping, no sound from the audience. Just silence, heavy, honest, the kind that doesn't need music or drama to feel big. Keanu kept going, his voice calm but sure. You once said, sometimes your pain is your ministry. I remember that. I've never forgotten it. Steve looked up now, eyes meeting Keanu's, and something passed between them. Not for the camera, not for the stage, just two men who had been through pain and were finally saying it out loud. You thought you were just talking, Keanu said. But you weren't. You were testifying. He let the words sit. No rush. No need to explain them. You weren't. Just filling time on a stage, he added. You were reaching people like me, at a time when we didn't even know we needed to be reached. Steve blinked slowly, lips pressed together, trying to keep it together. But it was clear. Something had shifted in him, not because of praise or attention, but because someone saw him for who he really was. Not just the jokes, not just the suits or the show, but the man behind it all, the one who was hurting too, and still chose to speak life into others. Keanu sat up straighter, his voice low but steady, like what he was about to say had been waiting a long time to be spoken. He looked at Steve, really looked at him. God doesn't always use the perfect, he said. He uses the willing. Steve's eyes stayed locked on his, like he was hearing something he didn't even know he needed. You weren't chosen because you had it all figured out, Keanu continued. You were chosen because you know what pain feels like, because you can speak to it. You don't talk above people, you talk with them. Steve's voice cracked as he asked quietly, Why me? Keanu didn't flinch. He answered without hesitation. Because you bled quietly, he said. You hurt where others hurt, and still you stood up, you kept showing up, that's why. Steve looked down, the tears coming again. But this time he didn't try to stop them. He wasn't embarrassed. He was just there, open, all walls down. Without a word, Keanu stood. Steve stood too. There was no music, no cue card, just the sound of breathing and something that felt sacred hanging in the air. Then Keanu said gently, Let's pray. Steve nodded, eyes closed, hand gripping the cross that had become more than jewelry. It was now a reminder of why he was still standing. The audience didn't move. No one clapped. No one shouted. It didn't feel like a show anymore. It felt like something else, something holy. And in that quiet moment, in that stillness full of truth, one thought seemed to settle across every heart in the room, and that's how the world began to believe again.